You're lying in your bed. The dull whirring of your air conditioner is the only thing separating you from total silence. You know that peculiar silence that's so heavy and so thick, it's almost the equivalent of a loud noise itself. The kind of silence where you can hear a pin drop 3 rooms away. The kind of silence that fills your ears with the sound of your own heartbeat as your ear presses against your pillow. That kind of silence. The dull whirring is the only noise you can hear, a noise that typically goes unnoticed, until it is the only noise present. It's comforting, whether you realize it or not, a sort of white noise. But suddenly, your room is back at the temperature specified on the thermostat, and the whirring comes to a stop. As the vent makes a dull clang, to your misfortune, you're not yet asleep, and the silence sets in. You should be comforted by the knowledge that you could hear anything and everything in your surroundings, making up for the lack of vision provided by the darkness. But you aren't. It's this very environment that sets you on edge, causes your heart to beat a bit faster, makes your body tense without explanation, and that makes you aware when you're not alone. But you are alone, right? You've been lying there with your eyes closed for almost 15 minutes now, and you made sure everything was normal in your room before you turned off the light. You're a smart one. All those Facebook quizzes you took have reinforced what you already know. If you were in a horror movie, you'd survive until the end. You've even made a carefully laid plan of what you'd do in any of the situations you've read about on creepypasta.com. But that stuff's just nonsense anyway. Right? You aren't scared. Or at least, that's what you keep telling yourself. But wait. What was that? Was that the rustling of fabric? But you didn't shift in your bed or make any movement. Did you make that noise? No, you couldn't have. You're paralyzed in your bed, stiff with an unease that was not present until these very moments. You must have imagined it. You must have. You roll over to face the wall, out of sight, out of mind. If there's something in the room with you, it'll just have to accept that you're much too tired to deal with it at the moment. You're still stricken with uneasiness as you hear rustling again. This time the rustling is accompanied by a soft thud on the ground. Your heart seizes in your chest. Did you really just hear that? No, you've gotten yourself worked up about nothing. You really should stop playing horror survival games so late at night. It's messing with your brain. You're a rational person. Stop acting so childish and just fall asleep already. You close your eyes tightly, silently, hoping sleep will whisk you away soon. You're practically begging for the safety of the non-existent dream world of your own creation. You're running away in a sense, but there's nothing there, right? You're just tired. I know. As your eyes are clenched tightly shut, you become aware that no matter how much you want to, you can no longer move your arms and legs. Come on now, are you really letting this get to you? What are you, 12 years old? Suck it up. Fall asleep already. Now more tense than ever, that unnerving sound echoes across the room again. The rustling of fabric, followed by a soft thud on the ground. Unwittingly, you're holding your breath now, eyes shut as tightly as possible. You have a childish urge to pull the blanket over your head. You're imagining it all. It's all in your head. I thought you were better than this. Your heart is pounding loudly in your ears now, but not loudly enough to drown out that now repetitive sound approaching from across the room. What's that rustling? Maybe you left some paper on the ground. That has to be it. And that thumping? Probably the cat, or the dog, or something. They probably ran in when you weren't looking before you closed the door. Yeah, you're just paranoid. The noise is now within a foot of your bed. And with your back to it, you don't dare turn around to investigate. Not that it'd do much good. The only light in your room is the dull glow of your cell phone on the nightstand next to you. You plugged it in before crawling into bed, remember? But you don't dare turn around and look. There's nothing there anyway. Minutes that feel like hours pass as you face the wall, stiff as a board, unable to will your uncooperative body to move. You haven't heard the noise in a while now, not since it reached the edge of your bed. You know there's nothing there. You're silly. It's the silence. It's messing with you. You really should have turned on some music or something before you went to bed. Oh well, maybe next time. Suddenly, a familiar clang echoes through the room, followed by that familiar whirring. You exhale deeply, your body relaxing as you're flooded with relief. Thank God that's over. Now you can finally sleep in peace. That silence was really getting to you. You roll over and open your eyes to check the time on your lit cell phone. It must have been at least an hour since you first went to bed. You're greeted face to face with his ear-to-ear grin, dimly lit sockets, where eyes once resided, stare intently at you.
I see you're still awake.
A few years ago, I was spending some time with my friends exploring old, supposedly haunted places. We were at the Edisto First Presbyterian Church, where a girl named Julia Laguerre was buried in her family mausoleum in 1852. People reported hearing unearthly screams time and time again, but never investigating the cause of it. 15 years later, when they opened the door to the mausoleum to inter the next family member who had died, finding her corpse huddled up in the corner next to the door, arms outstretched as if still trying to find the exit. My friends thought that it would be funny to shut the giant stone door, which was originally open, behind me, and pick me up in the morning. The bastards left me there. I tried and tried using all of my strengths, but I couldn't budge it. It had taken 4 people to just put it in place. In the dark, I resigned myself to the night ahead of me. Now, I normally don't frighten easily, but sitting there, in the relatively small place, surrounded by a looming pressure that I couldn't begin to explain, the darkness itself seemed to try to consume me. From all around, it felt like weight was pressing against my skin, making even breathing hard. I sat in the dark for what must have been hours. Then I heard scratches. They were faint at first. I was sure it was my imagination, but soon they became more and more frantic as time passed. I huddled up in one of the corners farthest from the door and tried to cover my ears, but nothing could stop the growing cacophony. This all may have lasted for a few minutes, but each second was an unbearable eternity. Then a loud scream echoed through the darkness. It was a wail of unrestrained pain and fear. The scratching stopped. For the first time, I could distinctly make out the sound of a girl sobbing to herself. The pitiful gasping of one without a shred of hope left. I felt such sorrow at that moment, such pain, that I think I forgot how to be afraid. In my heart, all of her suffering seemed to resonate. Inexplicably, I found myself apologizing aloud for everything that had happened to her. Hell, a part of me wanted to reach out and feel for a body to hug, but I couldn't bring myself to do it for fear that I truly would find one. I didn't know whether or not she heard me, or was even aware of my presence. The sobbing continued, and I could again hear fingers against the stone slab that was the tomb door. I fell asleep at some point, which I felt was a merciful gift from the fates. I'm not sure how long I was out, but I was awoken by a loud and powerful thud as the door slammed against the ground outside. I could tell from the light gray outside that Daybreak was near, so I must have slept for at least a few hours. I stumbled outside and went to a small, unlocked prayer house. I think previously it was a segregated mini-church. But regardless, I leaned against the door and waited nervously until my friends arrived. I approached them as they clustered around the fallen door. Two of them were kneeling next to it with faces of shock. There were bloody streaks covering the interior of the door, some with light scratches from fingernails, many without. I think now that she must have shrieked when they broke away from her hands, but I can't be sure. At first they looked at me, then checked my hands, and then nervously glanced at one another. I was rightfully pissed with them, and told them every detail of what I remembered, wanting them to know what I had been put through. Finally, after I grudgingly got into the car, and we started to head back, someone spoke up. My friend said to me, "We were afraid to say anything, but look at your face." I later found out that many times people had tried to permanently seal the entrance to the mausoleum, including heavy enough locks and chains that it would require heavy equipment to remove it, only to have it found torn open with the door lying on the ground once more. This was in the 1980s, the last attempt of many through the decades. It seemed like some force was ensuring that it was impossible to ever repeat the mistakes of the past. This is something I'm understandably quite grateful for, but to this very day, I'm chilled to the bone when I think of what happened that night. When I reached from the back seat and adjusted the rearview mirror, I saw that there was blood caked on my face. Just like the streaks upon the stone slab, there were dark red lines on either side, as if someone had gently cradled my face with torn fingers as I slept that night, feeling the warmth of another for the first time in over 100 years. Ghost stories? Nah, we don't have anything like that around here. No, we do have the story of Jacob, but that's about as close as you'll get. You really want to know? Well, I'm not supposed to tell you, but alright, just no interrupting. I don't have the patience for it. Let's see, how to describe Jacob Emery? Well, I guess you could say he was the kind of guy that you could never take notice of. This isn't to say that he was a bad kid, in any sense. Many people in this town thought that he was the most reliable person for an odd job in the state. But he never really excelled in anything. He was the living proof behind the statement, "Jack of all trades, ace of none." Most of this was due to his own lack of will. He dabbled in damn near everything this town could offer him. Automobiles, radio operations, store management, what have you. But he never stuck with anything. His friends and workers went after him about it a number of times, but everybody got the same unsatisfying response. It just wasn't enough. Well, needless to say, any friends he kept were either very patient or never spoke of the matter altogether. It was probably inevitable, then, that Jacob would leave to go abroad. I don't remember where he went, but I think Gertrude down the street knew, before she passed on. You have to scout someone else if you ever get curious. In any case, no one even tried to stop him. Everybody thought that a little travel would stamp the ambition out of him, or else feed it until it was no longer an issue. Hell, we even gave him a sending-off party, which I thought was pretty nice of everybody. So, anyway, he was gone for, 6, 7 years. I can't remember. You'll have to check with someone else about that, too. Anyway, he came back, eventually. And he had changed. Obviously enough. He was amiable, energetic, all smiles all the time, and we all quickly learned why. He showed us a souvenir he'd brought back, a solid black stick, the length of a pencil, but the texture of chalk. We all wondered why on earth such a simple thing would prompt such a spring in his step, until he gave his demonstration. He took a piece of paper, and with this stick... God, there's got to be a better word for it. With his stick, he drew a crude circle, and it dropped and rested on the border of the paper like a stone. It didn't leave the paper, but it acted out on it, sort of like an old movie projector on a screen. Son, I know how crazy that sounds, and if you feel like playing skeptic, you can leave an old man to his craziness. But I know what I saw, even if everybody's been hushing it up. And that stone he drew dropped. Jake even passed around the paper, and as it was being passed, it rolled around as the paper got tilted. None of us had any words for it. Hell, what was there to say? But he continued drawing demonstration after demonstration for us. Stick figures in various pageants and plays, doing everything from fighting each other to making perfect human pyramids. We all thought it was incredible. That was all the go-ahead that he needed. He announced that he planned to put on a show to pay for rent and food, where he would draw anything the crowd members wanted. That we talked to some length about, and he eventually convinced us that it would be safe, his drawings ethical, the practice lucrative and unique, and the attention would not go anywhere outside of the town's borders. Poor Jacob. If I'd not been so swept up in the moment, I might have read the signs right then and there, and saved the sorry son of a bitch by snapping the terrible thing in half. Yeah, but I was younger. We all were. We saw no problem with encouraging him. What we all saw was an incredible experience to be shared with everyone else. Now, he didn't have any big radio or television connections, mind you, and the internet wouldn't come around for another couple decades, so he did what all people on a shoestring budget do. He advertised his show with flyers. Flyers might not mean anything to city folk, but in a small town, they gain a fair glance over from time to time, and what's more, Jacobs managed to stick out by having little figures jump up and down and whatnot to get people's attention. His first show must have gotten nearly 60 or so people, probably a lot more than that. And his shows were fantastic. Someone would shout out a scene from a play or a comedy sketch, and Jake's hand would fly over a white wall like a bird. He'd been holding back when he made that stone, and that's for damn sure. His illustrations were all spot on, and he could make an incredible human figure in minutes. Come to think of it, I don't remember any of his scenes lasting more than 10 minutes to make. They were all really well-done scenes, too. And not only could you see a knight charge a castle, Jake would draw the castle's interior as well, like a wedding cake split down the middle, so you could see the knight scale the walls, fight his way through the levels to the dungeon, fight back out with the princess, and make a leaping jump off the castle's parapet onto his getaway horse, all in complete silence. Not realistic, no. But that was part of the appeal. None of us went in there expecting something real. When a scene or sketch was finished, either the characters would leave off the wall or he'd cover the wall with white paint. This was good, in a way. It gave these shows a time limit so that when he'd finished with all of the 4 walls in the room, everyone knew the show was over. Until the paint dried. Or Jake, meanwhile, was changing. In a bad way. I'd mentioned that upon his return, he'd been extremely energetic. Well, that energy, that fervor, or whatever you want to call it, it never left him. Not for an instant. Far from it. It seemed to grow in him, and he enjoyed it all too much. His eyes grew wider. He slept gradually less over time, his statements and opinions more radical and frenzied, and though he never was a pushover, he was starting to make people nervous in his company. A month or two passed, and Jake's audience grew like wildfire. Nearly everyone in the town paid to see Jake's art in action, and he had to rent out larger and larger places for them to sit. He now didn't stop after one scene was done. He moved directly on to the next, put on the next blank space on the wall, sometimes to the intriguing effect of causing scenes to mingle, which the crowd just loved. The subject matter got more wild and immoral. Monsters got more bizarre and creative. The fighters using more impossible weaponry, all for the sake of the crowd's interest. Jake got steadily more indulgent, which we figured was from the money. And he became a drinker and a womanizer, neither of which got rid of that vitality, by the way. Some of these women claimed that they'd woken up in the middle of the night to see him scribbling with that stick on a drawing pad, a giant grin on his face. And while most of them said that they'd never assumed he was drawing them in the nude, there's rumors that one or two of them got glances at that notepad. I mean, those anonymous few supposedly said that those drawings absolutely weren't nude pictures. But neither of them, whoever they are, will say what he was drawing. Don't bother looking for the notepads or flyers, though. They're all gone now. I'm getting off track. Point is, he was hitting the bottle, and that's important, because it was that drinking that would eventually ruin everything. On the night of one of his performances, as he walked in front of his cheering crowd, it was immediately apparent to everybody he was completely drunk. I was in the front row, and I could smell the bourbon on him from 10 feet away. When the show started, he went through a bunch of sketches and scenarios the crowd recommended, when at the end someone asked that he draw himself. Everyone cheered the idea, and I guess they'd been wondering what his creations thought of him, and he eventually obliged. No sooner had Jake finished, connecting the final 2 lines on his coat, that every single character across the vast, expansive wall all stopped and looked directly at that illustration. Lovers stopped kissing, clowns stopped laughing, robots stopped fighting pirates. Everything stopped and looked at the Jacob illustration. The crowd died down almost instantly. I remember Jake's face at that moment, pale, white, full of terrible comprehension at his mistake, and looked desperately for the cans of white paint that he'd forgotten to put out before the show. Everyone else? They were looking at fake Jacob. The Jacob reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a black stick of his own. And as we all watched, drew a door. He pushed on his side and the door swung open, allowing him to walk through onto the floor of the auditorium. The rest was an absolute hellish pandemonium. People screamed and ran for the exits as Jacob's characters, both those currently on the wall and those which had previously left before being covered up, ran out of their own exit, throwing pies, shooting lasers, blowing fire and poison, and the impossible. I was nearly enough to the exit to escape, and gave only one backwards glance. The scene will haunt me forever. Jacob Emery was being dragged by his creations, kicking and screaming, through the door his copy had made. The auditorium burned down, obviously enough, but I have no idea how many characters escaped, what happened to the fake Emery, or how many people died. The fire brought the fire department from the nearest cities up to over 100 miles away. They, in turn, brought the police force, which brought the government, which hushed everything up. They took the flyers and any art Jacob had made and swore everyone to secrecy, or else life detainment. The fire was blamed on a cigarette in the garbage during a basketball game, and we all eventually went on with our lives. Jacob was made to never have existed. In retrospect, I realize everything. Jacob hadn't been creating illustrations. Illustrations don't move, much less act or attack. They're just images people see, shadows made to look like real things. Jacob had been making life. Actual thinking things in some alternate dimension, using a power that had never been meant to fall into mortal hands. He got drunk on his power. His punishment was probably well-deserved. Incidentally, the government screwed up on 2 different accounts. They did a damn good job silencing everyone, but proof remains. The ruins are still there, you know. The auditorium's ruins. I hear they're going to start reconstruction soon, which will wipe out any remaining evidence someone can definitely see. But I went back there once, several years after the fire. Just once. Amidst the rubble, covered in ash, I saw something squirming. I looked closer. It was Jacob Emery's hand on the wall, exactly like it'd been 3 years ago. Sweaty but calloused. I remember it. But it was constantly flailing, as if the body it was attached to was still writhing in flames. That was mistake number 1. Number 2 was those creations. Like I said, I don't know how many escaped, nor how many the government found and caught. But I'll only say this. Those tall grass meadows on the outskirts of town, don't go into them. Ever. You were asking about those white figures you've seen at night, right? Well, this town doesn't have any ghost stories. We've all been there. You've just gone to a certain place, at a certain time, on a certain date, done a special thing, and the thing you suspected would happen has just fucking happened. Not to mention the fact that you've just seen whatever the fuck that lives in your mirror, been told in detail how you're going to die, and the highly demonic and invincible thing you summoned is heading towards you. Also, your family is dead. Your friends are all missing, and you're being framed by someone who has access to your bedroom. What the fuck do you do now, sweet protagonist? Well, you've come to the right place to find out. These are the simple rules one must follow in order to, firstly, not become the victim of creepypasta, and furthermore, to come out kicking if the worst does happen. With the help of this guide, you too can become the catatonic, traumatized wreck, as opposed to being the guy currently being worn as a coat by some dude who roams around a lot. Just keep these simple rules in mind. Rule number 1. Mirrors and darkness don't mix. Rule number 2. Actually, mirrors are a general no in the creepypasta world. There is nothing more sinister. Rule number 3. There is 0 chance of survival if you look at the thing that no one else can see or answer its question incorrectly. Rule number 4. If you're alone at night in a creepy mental institution, take some time to consider what the fuck you're doing there. Then if it's appropriate to do so, leave. Rule number 5. Avoid going to places where everyone else who went there never came back or died inexplicably. Rule number 6. If someone stops your vehicle at night and asks to come with you, it would probably be in your best interest to politely decline. Rule number 7. Killing is the last method of survival. Use it sparingly, but without fear. Rule number 8. Who was phone? Is always a good thing to ponder. Also, who the hell answers a phone while kissing a dead person's sexy daughter? A douche. That's it. Rule number 9. Get a simple .38 revolver, load it with 2 silver bullets. If you really feel there is no chance to come alive out of a situation, take 1 shot at whatever it is that's threatening you. If this doesn't work, you still have the last shot to become an hero with. Rule number 10. Area 51 is simply too well guarded to let you get in. Or to let any alien out. Rule number 11. When going to a hotel, try to steer clear of unauthorized areas. If you couldn't resist, but you saw a red thing, take some time to consider the price range and hotel standard on your next visit. Have you ever stayed at a haunted Hilton? Rule number 12. When booking your hotel stay, TripAdvisor can be an invaluable tool in deeming whether your choice is the scene of a multiple murder, full of dead people, or built at the mouth of hell. Local newspapers can also be helpful. Rule number 13. Invoking demons, speaking weird languages, and performing rituals of any kind is considered dangerous. Refrain from doing that, especially around abandoned warehouses, churches, psychiatric institutions, woods, and your house in front of a mirror at night. Rule number 14. When going to a new area, environmental understanding is key to survival. Ask around for cursed places, legends, dangers, and other details. Listen to the local people's advice, and don't be afraid to ask if you're unsure of which attacks or disappearances are paranormal and which aren't. Rule number 15. Always have a Bible next to your bed. Provides average reading material, proof of beliefs, and a really heavy and effective object to throw at enemies. Rule number 16. Don't count on holy water. Get a sturdy vial of sulfuric acid and let a priest consecrate it. Rule number 17. Japanese priests cleanse rooms by waving katana swords around. This ritual is 100% effective on corporeal forms. Rule number 18. If you find 666 messages on your phone, email, mailbox, etc., consider changing the said service provider. Also, don't bother listening or reading the messages. It's spam. Extra-dimensional, possibly, but spam nonetheless. Rule number 19. Old pharmaceutical companies can't help you, unless you specifically need blood of the innocent, snake oil, and radioactive syrup, which is never. Rule number 20. If you need to sign it in blood, you do not need to sign it. All mainstream governing bodies will accept contracts signed in ink. Bear this in mind if offered deals that seem too good to be true. Rule number 21. Lighthouses are dangerous. Avoid them at all costs. If you work at a lighthouse, consider a career in insurance sales or veterinary care. Rule number 22. There is simply no reason to listen to music that causes suicidal tendencies. Rule number 23. Or to watch films that have strange, disastrous consequences. Rule number 24. If you like to plan ahead and have some money, buy your auntie and uncle a house in Bel Air. Nothing can harm you there, no matter how scared your mother is. Rule number 25. Secret, secluded, untouched places and old buildings are left untouched for a reason. Pioneers never say die, but in fact they do have an unusually high mortality rate. Rule number 26. Before you start swimming in the ice-cold waters of a murky lake at the center of a dark forest at midnight, ask yourself, do you really want to travel to an ancient and terrifying city? If the answer is no, then stay at home instead and watch whatever quality programming is available on Cinemax. Rule number 27. On your 33rd birthday, try celebrating in a well-lit house with the company of others. Rule number 28. Refrain from using the one true name for anything. There is probably a reason that people gave it a nick. Rule number 29. Watching TV static for long periods of time may be hazardous to your health. Try satellite TV or Freeview to combat this problem. Rule number 30. Get a cat. These furry little hairballs seem to perceive unnatural phenomena better than us. And if desperate, simply throw it at whatever's about to get you. Rule number 31, safety in numbers. If you're getting a bit too freaked out, grab a few friends, any and all firearms, and avoid the area in question. Rule number 32, cemeteries are bad places, especially in foggy conditions and on Halloween. Rule number 33, try not to close your eyes. Ever. If you must do so only briefly. If something has moved from its original location in the time that it has taken you to blink, it's best that you do not blink again. Rule number 34. If you ever find an unmarked tape which contains the file extension .avi, even if it's one of your favorite kid shows, do not, under any circumstances, watch that tape. Rule number 35. If you hear chanting, run until you are out of earshot. Rule number 36. If you're too old to play with dolls, you do not need to be anywhere near one of these creepy little fuckers. Rule number 37. Legends can offer valuable insight of where not to go camping with your friends. Rule number 38. When babysitting, ascertain the family's tastes and preferences to avoid being killed by poorly selected statues. Rule number 39. Even if you're certain that running will not save you, it is always best to try. Rule number 40. If you go to buy a used video game, whether it's at a game shop or a garage sale, never ever buy one with a weird-looking cartridge. This includes strange colors, alternate covers, and ripped-off labels with titles written in marker. The latter tends to happen more often than not. You should also be highly suspicious of games priced too cheaply and bootlegs. Rule number 41. If you decide to buy the used game anyway, rip that son of a bitch out of your console the minute it starts acting funny and take a hammer to it. Rule number 42. One last thing that must be written: if you ever see a strange-looking new hallway with a strange face in it on a building you swore you didn't see at first, and that building happens to be an old chateau, don't fucking open it. Rule number 43. It's probably best to refrain from looking up on Google the phrase "huskies with grins." You'll just end up having to spread the word. Rule number 44. Never allow someone to take a picture of you with an outdated camera. If it's too late, your only bet is to gamble with death. Or just trap him in a photo. That works too. Rule number 45. Don't play with dolls if they come with a needle or a defect. Especially a defect. Rule number 46. Burn Ouija boards. Rule number 47. Never confront animated puppets physically. Subdue them with spells, or they'll come back with minions, or in a physical body. Rule number 48. If you find yourself unable to escape, dancing may ward off the entity. Doing the hokey pokey is known to ward off curious monsters, but you might have to do the moonwalk to deal with zombies. Rule number 49. If you're checking your computer for viruses, and you go too deep into System 32, creepy tapes on you, bitch. Rule number 50. If you see a homicidal raccoon with a rocket launcher, don't go fucking near it. Rule number 51. If you see old tapes containing the word happy or appy, pretend you never saw them. Just go on with your life. Rule number 52. If you buy a used camcorder and find the previous owner left one of their tapes inside, refrain from watching that tape no matter how tempting it may be. Rule number 53. Be careful when buying an old second-hand TV. Rule number 54. If you see a guy with both an incredibly large smile and black and white eyes, run. Rule number 55. Don't go to a friend's house to bake cupcakes if they have random spurts of insanity. Rule number 56. Phone companies with low coverage are best avoided. Rule number 57. .exe files with strange names are not safe. Don't open them. Rule number 58. For the love of Neptune, turn off your fucking faucet when you're done with it. Rule number 59. If you're told to not look behind you, it's better to do so, unless you're up against a wall. Rule number 60. Also, do not listen to anybody who tells you to go to sleep. It's better to run away. Rule number 61. If you see a tall man with tentacles, run. Rule number 62. Do not install programs with the number 666 on it. Rule number 63. Do not enter strange websites. Rule number 64. Do not enter strange places. Rule number 65. Not even strange videos. Rule number 66. If a woman who covers her mouth asks you if she's beautiful, tell her she's average. Rule number 67. No good can ever come from owning a shiny Pokemon. Rule number 68. If you're an intern at a cartoon studio and you happen to be reviewing a new episode, make sure the episode is safe for work before viewing that shit. Rule number 69. Don't be so hesitant when being asked to look behind you. But don't take forever. No reason to keep certain death waiting. Rule number 70. Weird shit in Europe won't hurt you in the United States. Leave that up to the creepy dark. Rule number 71. Weird shit in the United States won't hurt you in Europe. Damn it. Rule number 72. Should you break Rule 55, there's always a chance of rescue. Rule number 73. If your brother is tired of noise, or your close friend has a brother like that, refrain from going into his basement unless you want to be tortured, raped, and killed. Rule number 74. If you buy a memory card and it has saved data on it, delete all of the saves. Rule number 75. If you get a drawing of Sonic on a disc, and in that disc is a .exe file called Sonic, don't play it. Destroy it, or a demonic being that will look like Sonic will kill you. Rule number 76. Whatever you do, do not become afflicted with slender sickness, unless you want to become one of the undead. Rule number 77. If you see what appears to be a 12-year-old kid with black shorts, a gray, bloody shirt, red shades, and a maniac grin, do not, under any circumstances, piss him off. Rule number 78. Whatever you do, download Sonic Roboblast 2 from a link from the official website. Rule number 79. Even on Christmas, paranormal activity can happen. Follow these simple rules and little, or massive, harm may befall you. Either way, the important thing is to make sure that your tale is told, copied, and pasted repeatedly. And it's also suggested that I read it.